Good morning. It's April the 26th, 2021, and our reading in Judges today is in chapter 19. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her father's house, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, prevailed upon him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day, they got up early, and he prepared to leave. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterwards, the girl's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the girl's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day's nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went towards Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddle donkeys and his concubine. When they were near Jebus and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into an alien city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." He added, "Now, let's try to reach Gibeah of Ramah and spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them into his home for the night. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the men of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, where I live. I've been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I'm going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me into his house. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, your maidservant, and the young man with us. We don't need anything." "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they'd washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this disgraceful thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I'll bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But to this man, don't do such a disgraceful thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine, limb by limb, into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a thing has never been seen or done. not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Think about it. Consider it. Tell us what to do. Amen. And so sin spreads. We saw it taking over one man, Samson, one family, the family of Micah, one tribe, the Danites. And now, by the end of this chapter, all of Israel seems to be touched and infected by this spreading moral disease. Is this the darkest day in the history of Israel? Well, it begins ominously enough. In those days, Israel had no king. We can sort of sense what's coming. The Levite who's mentioned here, well, he's a religious leader, but he has a concubine, probably his second or third wife. This was normal in those days. She then, verse 2, it says, is unfaithful to him, which probably simply means what it goes on to say. She left him and went back to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah. It probably simply means that. Well, verses 3 to 8, after 4 months, he goes after her, who is now staying at her father's house. And something strange happens. He is showered with great hospitality by this older man. Now, that theme of hospitality is an important one running through the chapter, as we'll see. So they spend 5 days together. That's clear from verse 9. 5 days. But eventually they set off. He makes a firm decision not to stay at Jebus, what was later called Jerusalem, in verse 12, because they were alien people. This was still being ruled by Canaanites or some of the other tribes of the land. They're going to press on to Gibeah. That's part of Benjamin. And the hope is, though it's a very ironic, as we'll see, that there they will find hospitality among their own people. Well, initially, of course, they don't. Verse 15, they're just sitting in the square and they think they'll have to stay the night there. But then hospitable old man number 2 turns up in verse 20. And you can see how sincere and warm and welcoming he is. Everything now seems to be working out. Everything seems to be going swimmingly. But then the lawlessness that's hinted at in verse 1, that is the root and the source of the pollution and the corruption that's in this society, begins to erupt in a way that there are obvious echoes of Genesis 19 and Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know what happened there. We know how that turned out. So verse 22, we have this aggressive homosexual gang who just want the stranger, the man, to have sex with him. Then we see the response of the 2 men in the house, and it's a sickening response. The older man offers his daughter, and then the Levite gives them. That's the implication. Verse 25. No discussion, no, nothing, it's just this is the answer. He gives them his concubine, who is then repeatedly gang raped throughout the night. Verse 25, left for dead. And then when the Levite comes out of the door, the front door of the house in the morning, to make his way to move on, again, he encounters this woman who is his wife or one of his wives, dumped on the doorstep, having gone through the horrors of all of that. And he is incredibly callous and hard-hearted, it would seem. He doesn't ask after her or show any concern. Okay, he just says, get up, let's go. They do go home, but by the time they reach there, she's dead. And then verse 29, one of the strangest and most horrible verses in the whole Bible. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel, creating, of course, the terrible consternation of verse 30. And then chapter 20, it leads to a kind of a civil war. It's almost like what's happening to this woman is a picture of what threatens to happen to the whole nation, that they will be ripped apart limb by limb. And this is the result when the church becomes like the world, when God's people are indistinguishable from the pagans. In fact, they're even worse. That's what we see here. If we turn to Romans chapter 1 to finish, this is in some ways a very obvious and a very helpful parallel in the New Testament. All the elements of Judges 19 are described in Romans chapter 1. False religion, moral degradation, such hardness and insensitivity, both to people and to God. This is describing a pagan world. And Judges 19, though it is nominally religious, though they are still the people of God, this is Israel, yet it is now a pagan society. What is God's response to such a world that rejects him and does not love neighbor? What is God's response to that in the book of Judges, in the history of Israel? What is God's response to such a world today? Romans chapter 1, verse 18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness.